Hi, this is Gene Trowbridge. I'm the founding partner of Trowbridge and A Law Group. We're securities attorneys, and today I'm going to talk to you about the common mistakes that syndicators can make that I've experienced over the years. Here's our contact information if you ever want to contact us by telephone, or go to our website and set up a free consultation, or just subscribe to our YouTube channel and watch one of the many YouTubes we have on different topics in the securities law area. But let's get on and talk about common mistakes. So this is who I am. Many of you know me. I was a former syndicator before I became a lawyer. I built quite a bit of self-storage facilities in Southern California. I'm a real estate broker for many years, 40 years as a active senior CCIM instructor. But when I was 45, I went to law school and moved on to be a securities attorney, where I've been practicing ever since. I have the 4th edition of my book, It's a Whole New Business, is out. And at the end of this presentation, I'll show you how you can get a free PDF copy of the book, or a free hard copy if you just pay the shipping. And in my spare time, I'm an old runner. I run a couple half marathons every year. Slower than I used to. Father Time, is tough, but that's what I do. So let's talk about today's topic. Small mistakes that I see syndicators make. First of all, doing a project where the property does not provide current cash flow. That's somewhat of a marketing issue. There are a lot of investors out there who invest for the current cash flow. And if it doesn't provide current cash flow, and those are the groups of investors you're after, you're going to have trouble raising money. In my syndication experience, I never did a project that provided current cash flow. I always did development projects. So we put in our money, we'd wait 2.5, 3 years, we'd sell the project for a profit, and everyone would get a chunk of cash. Well, my investors were looking for equity buildup, not cash flow. So one of the things I have observed over the years is that your investors are going to be one of two kinds. They're going to be investors who are interested in current cash flow, or investors who already have their current cash flow needs solved and are interested in building up their equity. Well, that's going to make a difference when you bring a project out. Don't bring a project out that doesn't fit the needs of your investors. You'll certainly have trouble selling it up front, and then if things don't work out the way you plan, you'll have more trouble in the future. Another mistake that I see sponsors making is taking all their profits at the end. Well, that might sound good when you're marketing up front, that you tell the people, I won't take any acquisition fees, no management fees, no anything. I'll make it all in the back. Well, what happens if the project doesn't work? Well, then you get no profit, so you've worked for free. This is not a charity business. Sponsor should get paid for their efforts, so that would be a mistake. An inappropriate debt structure. Primarily what I'm concerned about is, why would a sponsor sign a recourse loan when there are non-recourse loans out there? Well, that kind of depends upon what you're syndicating. For example, if you were going to syndicate apartment projects and you could go to Fannie and Freddie, you can get non-recourse loans. But if you're going to syndicate, let's say, an industrial building, you may have to go to a different type of lender that is going to require a recourse loan. So you need to research that and be comfortable as a sponsor that that's really what you want to do. Remember, being a sponsor has its own risk. I don't know if you really want to take on the risk of a recourse loan if you don't have to. Another mistake, which really affects marketing, is your deal structure is too complicated. It's hard to understand. We have some sponsors who make their waterfall, their deal structure, totally dependent upon the understanding of internal rate of return. That may work depending upon who your investors are, and it may not work. We have some sponsors who bring out many, 3 or 4 unit types. One unit type has a definition and gets paid this, and another unit type has a definition and gets paid that. And it gets too complicated. And anytime your investors find that it's too complicated, you're going to find that their answer to investing with you is no. Trying to do a blind pool as your first offering. Well, a blind pool means we don't know what the property is. We're just simply going to go out and raise money, and then we're going to buy something. Well, I think one of the issues that a sponsor has is a question that the investor will ask. Have you done this before? And if you haven't done it before and you don't have a track record of doing projects, a blind pool is going to be extremely difficult to raise money for. And some people call me and say, well, I want to do a blind pool to buy my first property, a single standalone property. Well, that'll never work, because the marketplace says, even if I put money into your fund and then you come out with this one property you're going to buy, I might say no, and I might want my money back. So you have to sell the deal twice. So in the order of questions that investors ask, the first question is always, hey, if I give you my money, what happens if something happens to you? And that's a question of continuity that we deal with. But the second question is always, have you done this before? And if your answer is no, you're going to have trouble raising money. Now, if you're going to do a specific offering where you're going to raise money for one project that's identified ahead of time, and you have some experience. I mean, we've done hockey teams, we've done investments, we've done things that are patents, we've done all sorts of things other than real estate, but it's still a question, have you done this before? And if you can tell people what your experience is, even though this is the first syndication you've done, but you have experience in your own life of doing some of these things, you can overcome that question. Smaller mistakes are giving the investors too much control. And a lot of first-time syndicators think that they want to give the investors the opportunity to vote on everything. Well, why? You're the syndicator, you're the expert, the investors are coming to you. If the investors wanted to make all the decisions, they'd go and do their own deals. But the investors don't have the time, the money, or the knowledge, so they come to you. So there are certain things you might want to give them control of. In our offering documents, the investors always have the right to remove the manager on maybe a 75 or 80% vote. That has to happen because things happen to people, and sometimes you just have to remove them. Not that they've done anything wrong. I mean, we've just come through COVID. I've had sponsors die. Sponsors get very, very sick for years at a time. So there are reasons to remove the manager. So, but other than that, I think the sponsor should have control. I don't think the sponsor necessarily needs to get a majority vote when it's time to sell something. However, I do know that first-time sponsors, first-time syndicators want the offering to look really good to the investors, and this is one of the ways they do it. That's fine, but just remember, you start out giving investors control in your first offering. They're going to expect it in your second offering and your 12th offering. And so you have to be careful about setting a precedent. Undercapitalizing the raise, there's always something that goes that you don't expect when you do a syndication. So don't hesitate to go out and raise some money for reserves. Put it in the bank. If you're going to raise $1 million, why wouldn't you raise $1.1 million and have $100,000 there in reserves? It's, oh, well, my gosh, that's going to change the yield. Well, the yield isn't important if you lose the deal. The yield isn't terribly important if you don't have enough money for a rainy day. So don't short yourself when you raise capital. And make sure you have adequate insurance. And then once again, adequate reserves. Bigger mistakes that I've found sponsors make: not having enough time to raise money. My feeling is this is about a 90-day process from the time you sign a letter of intent until there's a closing. If you're going to do a syndication, I think you need to give yourself 90 days. If you were going to buy the property yourself, you might be able to do it in 60. But if you're going to do a syndication, I think it's going to take a little longer. You're going to get the letter of intent. You're going to go into negotiating the purchase and sale agreement. Then you're going to go to the lender. And it takes a little bit longer to fund a loan when there's an entity buying the property. And while you're at the lender working through all this, you're working with our firm on how to get the PPM and the operating agreement and everything done. And all that's about 30 days. So now 30 days is gone. You finally can go out and raise money. And it's going to take you about 30 days to get all the money in. And then you have to tie things up with the lender. And I would suggest when you negotiate your purchase and sale agreement, you negotiate 90 days. Now, times being what they are, some sellers won't sit still for 90 days. So can you negotiate 60 days and an extension, or do you have to walk from the deal? There are some times that if a seller says, you really want to buy my property, they'll give you 6 months because no one else is buying it. So it just depends upon the market. Paying finder's fees to anyone who does not have a securities license. People will come to you and say, hey, I'll raise $1 million for you if you give me $25,000 as a fee. Well, who is this person? They're just a person off of the street who happens to have a group of investors. They'd like to bring their investors in your deal, and they'd like to get paid for that. Well, that's why we have securities licenses. You're selling a security. This person is also selling a security, but they don't have a securities license. So the rule is, and this is a little technical, there can be no transaction-based fees paid to a non-registered broker-dealer. So if you don't have a securities license, you're a non-registered broker-dealer. And if you get paid, you're violating the laws. So that's going to be trouble for you and really trouble for the person who brings those investors in. Because it's a little known fact that if you are found to have sold the securities when you're a non-licensed securities dealer, the deal goes wrong, the investors can come after you for rescission. So you raised $1 million, you got a $25,000 fee, the deal goes bad, and now all your investors come after you, and you are responsible for giving them their $1 million back. That's a problem. So I don't think you should do that as just a normal person, and I don't think the manager should take you in either. Here's one of the mistakes that I made, thinking you always have to have a deal on the street. You know, you're raising money, it's a machine, you're raising money, you're doing a deal, you've got another deal in waiting, you're raising money. Boy, what happens if your business is raising money and that's how you make a living and you go 6, 8, 9 months without a deal? Boy, that's trouble. So don't think you always have to have a deal on the street. Make sure that the deal that you bring out is a deal that if you had the money, you'd buy it yourself. And the reason you're a syndicator is you don't have the money to buy all the real estate you want yourself. So if this deal is really good and you had all the money, you'd buy it yourself, fine. Don't bring a deal out that's questionable just so you're constantly in the market. And one of the other issues that I had in this is I was raising all my money through the broker-dealer community. And so were a lot of other syndicators. And if I didn't have a deal on the street, at least I thought if I didn't have a deal in front of the other securities brokers, someone else would. And maybe a securities broker who liked my deals would decide that the deals brought to them by a different sponsor are better. So there's a lot of reasons to worry about this, but the mistake is thinking you always have to have a deal on the street at any one time. Very big mistakes. I've already covered this. Not having a plan for continuity. First question an investor will ask, what happens if something happens to you? In our firm, we won't do an offering. We won't represent a client who as an individual is going to be the manager. There has to be something in the manager LLC that provides continuity in case something happens to the individuals in charge, and for a short period or a long period, they're unable to continue. Banks generally won't go along with an individual manager either. They have some ways to deal with that, but their ways are always to bring in someone who's going to step in if the manager is no longer able to perform. You think about it. Who's the biggest investor in the project? The lender. And all of a sudden the manager isn't able to perform. That causes risk to the lender. So they'll see through that, and they'll bring some onerous provisions in there that you might not like. So in our manager LLC, we need to have at least two people. Not having a plan for liquidity. So the first question I said investors ask is, if something happens to you, what happens to my money? The second question I ask is, I say they're going to ask, or they should ask, is, have you done this before? The third question they should ask is, are you going to have skin in the game? Are you going to invest in this project yourself? Okay. And you have to have a good answer for all those things. And the fourth question they're going to ask is, what happens if something happens to me and I need my money back? Well, the answer there is you're going to have a well-drafted operating agreement. Your attorney is going to draft an operating agreement that's going to have provisions for voluntary liquidity or involuntary liquidity. Voluntary liquidity, I want to give my interest to someone. Involuntary liquidity, I'm getting sued, I'm getting divorced, I died, and we need to liquidate. So a good operating agreement has that covered, and you need to know what your operating agreements say so you can cover that objection from the investor. And those are the four biggest mistakes. In fact, I have another video here on our YouTube channel called The Four Questions. The four questions an investor could ask, and I dig into that in more depth. The biggest mistakes, and the first one is drafting your own document. I'm not just saying that because I'm a securities lawyer. I'm just saying that I've been an expert witness in the courtroom when people have come in who did draft their own documents and things went wrong. And generally, the court says the standard in the profession is to have a professional securities attorney draft your document. It's not a do-it-yourself practice. So I would suggest you take that advice. Even if I draft the documents for you, a very big mistake I find is investors not thoroughly reading and following your documents. I know you're in the mood of raising money and you've got to go quickly, and so you get your final documents. It wouldn't hurt you to spend a couple hours to read them and understand what they say. Because one of the biggest problems you'll have in raising money is if an investor asks you a question and you can't answer it, and it's in your documents. That doesn't sound very good. It doesn't work very well, and that investor probably won't invest with you. So they're going to ask you questions about liquidity, and they're going to ask you questions. I have another video on it about, hey, I've got $1 million sitting in an accommodator account, and I want to invest in your LLC. Do you know that 3 or 4 times in all of our documents, we give the answer to that? Do you know that? Well, you would if you read your documents. So that's very, very important. Making cash distributions from reserves. Well, you know, you go to the bank, you've got money in the bank, and you can pull out your interest. That's fine. That's the return on your money. But if you pull out interest and principal, you're returning to yourself some of your capital. Well, that's the way the syndication is. You've raised money, you put it in a reserve account. So that's the member's capital. And when it's time to make a distribution quarterly or at the end of the year, the operating income isn't quite what you wanted to make a distribution. So you reach in the reserves, take some of the money and send it to your investors. And you tell them that this is a 6% yield. Well, it's not. Whatever the yield is, but whatever extra cash you send them is a return of capital. Two problems there. Number one, that's a fraudulent statement. Sending people their money back and calling it earnings is a lie. It's fraudulent. And number two, you don't have that money in the reserve account anymore. So when it's time to do what you needed to do with the reserves and you don't have the money, how are you going to explain that to your investors? And really, the investors want the project to go well. That's more important to them than just to get this quarter's a distribution check. It might be difficult for you to tell them you can only pay them 4% if they were expecting 6%. But that's much less of a problem than going into their capital and sending them their capital back, telling them it's a yield and reducing your reserves. One is fraudulent and the other one is probably fraudulent too. So I think you have to be very, very careful. So I mentioned the fact that I have a book, the 4th edition of It's a Whole New Business, and you can get a free PDF of my book by going to the web, this link, book.tnllp.com. And the book has a number of chapters, and they're all listed on the left-hand side of the screen. And we talk about the things that I've just discussed in this book. And some of them are covered in the first 2 chapters, fiduciary duties to the investors and risk and reward. We talk about the problem when you control money of other people. That's what happens when you're a syndicator. You take their money and you control it, and you're responsible for being truthful and managing their money better than yours. So anyhow, you can get a free PDF of my book. If you want to go to the website, you can also, for just shipping, get a free hard copy of the book. We'll ship it to you. Or you can, I guess, go to Amazon and listen to the book that I narrated in the Audible section. So there's our 3 ways you can get some of the information that I offer through my law firm. And once again, contact us. You can make a call. You can go to the website, see all the things we have on the website, sign up for a free consultation with one of our attorneys. And before you leave here, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And then that way, I'll see you on some of the other great YouTubes we have on our channel. Thank you.